Grizzly bears are powerful, unpredictable, and terrifying when desperate. As wild habitats shrink and food sources become scarce, encounters between humans and bears are escalating and sometimes end in tragedy. Whether deep in mountain forests or along frozen Arctic coasts, these apex predators have torn down doors, stalked lone hikers, and ambushed emergency responders. In each case, survival came at a cost, if at all. These aren't accidents. They're raw, chilling stories of nature's fury unleashed. In this video, we uncover real-life bear attacks, from a deadly home invasion in Russia to a hunter's last stand in Alaska. The remote village of Mikhailovka sat nestled in the dense taiga forests of Russia's Amur region, where the bitter winters stretched endlessly and spring arrived with reluctant warmth. This particular settlement, established in 1962 as a logging outpost, housed fewer than 200 souls who had learned to coexist with the wilderness that surrounded their modest wooden homes. The region had always been known for its abundant wildlife, including the massive Ussuri brown bears that roam the forests. However, encounters with humans remained relatively rare due to the vast expanses of untouched wilderness that provided ample hunting grounds. On the morning of May 1st, 2025, Dmitry Volkonsky and his wife, Yelena, had planned a quiet celebration of the spring holiday with their two young children, Maxim, 8 years old, and Ksenia, 6 years old. The family lived in a traditional log cabin on the village's eastern edge, where Dmitry worked as a mechanic for the local forestry equipment company. Their home, built in the Soviet era with thick timber walls and small windows, had weathered decades of harsh seasons. However, recent economic hardships had prevented the proper maintenance of some exterior features. The trouble began before dawn when Dmitry discovered that something had attacked their small livestock pen during the night. Their 3 goats lay scattered across the muddy yard, their bodies bearing the unmistakable marks of massive claws. Yelena noticed the enormous paw prints in the soft earth around their property, each track measuring nearly a foot in length. The couple had heard rumors from neighboring villages about a particularly aggressive bear that had been spotted throughout the winter months, apparently injured and unable to hunt effectively in its natural habitat. As the morning progressed, the family attempted to salvage what remained of their small farm while keeping the children safely indoors. Dmitry managed to repair the damaged fence posts, though he remained constantly alert for any signs of the predator's return. The local authorities had been notified, but the nearest wildlife management office sat more than 60 kilometers away, and response times in such remote locations often stretched into days rather than hours. The bear returned shortly after noon, emerging from the tree line with a pronounced limp that suggested an old injury to its left rear leg. The massive creature, weighing an estimated 400 kilograms, showed clear signs of malnutrition despite its imposing size. Its thick brown coat appeared patchy and dull, indicating months of poor feeding and possible illness. The animal moved with desperate aggression rather than the typical caution displayed by healthy bears encountering human settlements. Dmitry spotted the approaching threat from their kitchen window and immediately shouted for his family to retreat to the back storage room, which could be secured with a heavy wooden door and metal latch. Yelena grabbed both children and rushed them through the narrow hallway, while Dmitry attempted to frighten the bear away by banging pots and shouting from the relative safety of their home. The bear, however, showed no signs of intimidation and instead began investigating the exterior walls of the structure. The first breakthrough came when the frustrated animal discovered a loosely fitted window on the ground floor. Using its powerful forepaws, the bear shattered the glass and wooden frame, sending dangerous shards across the family's living room. The sound of splintering wood and breaking glass terrified the children, who huddled against their mother in the cramped storage space. At the same time, Dmitry positioned himself between his family and the interior door. What followed represented every parent's worst nightmare as the determined predator forced its way through the damaged window opening. The bear's massive shoulders barely fit through the frame, but hunger and desperation drove the animal forward, despite the obvious discomfort. Once inside, the creature began systematically destroying furniture and searching for food sources, its powerful claws leaving deep gouges in the wooden floors and walls. The family's barricade proved inadequate against such raw power. Within minutes, the bear had located their hiding place and begun testing the door's strength with increasingly violent strikes. The metal latch, designed to keep out human intruders rather than wild animals, began to bend under the repeated impacts. Dmitri attempted to brace the door with his body weight, but the physics of the situation heavily favored the 800-pound predator on the opposite side. When the door finally gave way, the bear immediately focused on the smallest occupants of the room. Despite their parents' desperate attempts at intervention, both Maxime and Xenia suffered fatal injuries within seconds of the animal's entry. The attack lasted only moments, but the trauma inflicted proved insurmountable for the young victims. Yelena sustained severe lacerations to her arms while attempting to shield her children, though she would eventually recover from her physical wounds. The bear's retreat came suddenly and without apparent reason, possibly triggered by the arrival of concerned neighbors who had heard the commotion from several hundred meters away. Viktor Petrov and his adult son had approached the Volkonsky property after noticing the unusual sounds and broken glass visible from the main village road. Their presence, combined with the bear's apparent satisfaction at having accessed food sources within the home, prompted the animal's departure back into the surrounding forest. Emergency responders arrived nearly 4 hours after the initial attack, having traveled from the regional center over poorly maintained rural roads. The responding medical team could only confirm what the surviving family members already knew, while wildlife officials began tracking the injured bear through the dense woodland. The animal was located and destroyed 3 days later, approximately 8 kilometers from the village. The tragedy shocked the tight-knit community and prompted immediate discussions about improved wildlife management protocols for remote settlements. The incident highlighted the growing problem of human-wildlife conflict in regions where traditional hunting grounds have been disrupted by climate change and industrial development. Local authorities implemented new requirements for reinforced doors and windows in homes located near forest boundaries, though such measures came too late for the Volkonsky family. Dmitri and Yelena eventually relocated to a larger town where psychological support services were available, though the couple struggled with survivors' guilt and the traumatic memories of that spring morning. The abandoned Volkonsky home remained empty for months afterward, serving as a stark reminder to village residents about the unpredictable dangers that existed just beyond their doorsteps in the vast Siberian wilderness. The Great Smoky Mountains of Tennessee had witnessed countless hiking adventures since the establishment of the national park system in 1934. Still, few incidents matched the harrowing experience that befell Samantha Lee on a crisp October morning in 2019. The region, renowned for its diverse wildlife population and challenging terrain, attracts thousands of outdoor enthusiasts annually. However, park officials consistently warn visitors about the approximately 1,500 black bears that call these ancient mountains home. The particular section where Samantha chose to hike that day featured steep ridgelines and dense hardwood forests that had remained largely unchanged for centuries. Samantha Lee, a 29-year-old marketing consultant from Nashville, developed a passion for solo hiking during her college years and has maintained the habit despite her demanding career schedule. She possessed considerable experience navigating Tennessee's backcountry trails, having completed dozens of challenging routes throughout the southeastern United States. Her planned route for that October day involved a moderately difficult 12-mile loop that would take her through some of the park's most scenic overlooks, though the trail's remote nature meant encountering other hikers remained unlikely. The morning began perfectly with clear skies and comfortable temperatures that made hiking conditions ideal for someone of Samantha's experience level. She had informed park rangers of her intended route and expected return time, following standard safety protocols that she had practiced for years. Her backpack contained essential emergency supplies, including a first aid kit, an emergency beacon, and sufficient food and water for the planned journey. The trail initially followed well-maintained paths with clear markings and regular distance indicators. Problems arose approximately 6 miles into her hike when Samantha reached a particularly challenging section, known for its steep descents and loose rock formations. The recent autumn rains had made the terrain more treacherous than usual, though she had encountered similar conditions on previous expeditions without incident. Park maintenance crews had posted warnings about trail conditions, but experienced hikers like Samantha typically felt confident navigating such obstacles with proper caution and technique. The accident occurred suddenly when Samantha attempted to navigate around a fallen tree that partially blocked the trail. As she stepped onto what appeared to be solid ground beside the obstacle, the rain-softened earth gave way beneath her hiking boots. She tumbled approximately 15 feet down a steep embankment, crashing through underbrush and striking several rocks before coming to rest in a narrow ravine that ran parallel to the main trail. The fall resulted in a compound fracture of her left ankle and multiple lacerations from sharp branches and rocks. More concerning was her location, which placed her well below the established trail and out of sight from any potential rescuers who might pass overhead. Her emergency beacon had been damaged during the fall, though she managed to activate a weak distress signal that would prove crucial to her eventual rescue. As darkness approached, Samantha made an effort to be as comfortable as possible while conserving her remaining energy and supplies. The temperature dropped significantly after sunset, and she could hear various nocturnal animals moving through the surrounding forest. Her injuries prevented any meaningful attempt to climb back to the trail level, leaving her completely dependent on outside assistance for survival. The black bear appeared shortly after midnight, likely attracted by the scent of blood from Samantha's various wounds. The animal, an adult female weighing approximately 200 pounds, had probably been foraging in the area when she detected the unusual presence in her territory. Black bears in this region had become increasingly habituated to human presence due to frequent camping and hiking activities, though direct aggressive encounters remained relatively rare. Samantha initially attempted to frighten the approaching bear by making noise with her aluminum trekking pole and shouting as loudly as her weakened condition allowed. The bear showed curiosity rather than immediate aggression, circling the injured hiker while investigating the unfamiliar situation. Wildlife experts later theorized that the animal's behavior had been influenced by previous positive associations between humans and food sources near popular camping areas. The attack began when Samantha made a sudden movement with her trekking pole, possibly triggering the bear's defensive instincts. The animal lunged forward and inflicted severe bite wounds to her left arm and face before she could mount any effective defense. The mauling lasted only seconds, but the damage proved extensive, particularly around her left eye socket and cheek area. Fortunately, the bear retreated after delivering the initial attack, apparently satisfied that the threat had been neutralized. Samantha remained conscious throughout the ordeal and managed to apply basic first aid to her most serious wounds using supplies from her damaged backpack. The remainder of the night passed without further wildlife encounters, though she later reported hearing various animals moving nearby. Search and rescue teams located Samantha approximately 8 hours after receiving her emergency beacon signal. The rescue operation required specialized equipment due to the difficult terrain and her injuries, but paramedics successfully stabilized her condition before helicopter evacuation to a regional medical center. Her physical recovery required months of reconstructive surgery and rehabilitation, though she permanently lost vision in her left eye. DNA analysis of saliva samples from Samantha's wounds matched that of a female black bear previously identified by wildlife officials near popular camping areas within the park. The animal exhibited clear signs of food conditioning, having learned to associate human presence with readily available meals. Park officials made the difficult decision to euthanize the bear due to its aggressive behavior toward humans and the potential threat it posed to future visitors. The incident prompted park officials to review their wildlife management policies and implement additional measures to prevent conflicts between bears and humans. Samantha eventually returned to hiking, though she now travels exclusively with companions and avoids remote trail sections where emergency response times might prove inadequate. The Carpathian Mountains of Romania had served as a winter destination for adventurous skiers since the 1960s, when communist-era authorities developed several remote lodges to accommodate the growing interest in alpine sports. One such facility, nestled at an elevation of 1,400 meters near the village of Sinaia, had operated continuously for decades, despite its isolated location and aging infrastructure. The lodge, constructed from heavy timber and stone in traditional mountain architecture, typically closed its doors by late March, when spring weather made skiing conditions unreliable and access roads treacherous. On March 28, 2017, an unexpected late-season storm caught both guests and staff unprepared at the remote facility. Elena Popescu, a travel writer from Bucharest, had arrived 3 days earlier with her husband Andrei to document the lodge's rustic charm for a tourism magazine. Their assignment involved photographing the facility's authentic mountain atmosphere and interviewing longtime staff members about the lodge's colorful history during Romania's transition to democracy. The storm system moved in rapidly from the west, bringing heavy snow and dangerous winds that made helicopter access impossible and blocked the narrow mountain road leading to the lodge. Elena and Andre found themselves stranded alongside 4 other guests, a German photographer named Klaus Weber, an elderly British couple, and a young Romanian businessman who had been celebrating a successful contract negotiation. The lodge's staff, eager to return to their families before conditions worsened, decided to close early and evacuate via the last available transport. In their haste to secure the building and depart before the storm intensified, the staff inadvertently left a side entrance door unlocked. This particular door, used primarily for supply deliveries, featured a heavy wooden frame, but lacked the reinforced security measures found on the main entrances. The oversight would prove critical as the 6 stranded guests settled in for what they assumed would be a quiet evening, waiting out the weather system. The brown bear that approached the lodge during the early morning hours had likely been wandering the area in search of food following an unusually harsh winter. European brown bears in the Carpathian region typically emerged from hibernation in early spring with depleted fat reserves and an urgent need to locate nutritional sources. This particular animal, a mature male weighing approximately 300 kilograms, showed signs of prolonged food stress and the disoriented behavior that often accompanied such conditions. Elena first noticed unusual sounds coming from the lodge's exterior around 3 a.m. She initially attributed the noises to wind-blown debris or settling timber, common occurrences during mountain storms. However, the sounds became more persistent and purposeful, suggesting the presence of a large animal investigating the building's perimeter. When she mentioned her concerns to Andre, he dismissed them as typical mountain lodge acoustics amplified by the storm. The bear's entry through the unsecured side door created immediate pandemonium throughout the lodge's main level. The animal knocked over furniture and scattered luggage as it explored the unfamiliar environment, apparently searching for food sources. Its massive size and strength made quick work of the lodge's rustic furnishings, reducing carved wooden tables and chairs to splinters within minutes of entry. Elena and Andre, awakened by the crashing sounds below, immediately recognized the gravity of their situation. They quickly alerted the other guests and began searching for secure locations within the lodge's upper level. The building's design, while charming for tourism purposes, offered limited options for barricading against a determined predator of such size and strength. The 6 guests eventually gathered in a storage closet located near the lodge's kitchen area, reasoning that the small space could be more easily defended than the open sleeping quarters. They used available furniture and supplies to reinforce the door, while maintaining absolute silence to avoid attracting the bear's attention. The animal's movements throughout the lodge created a constant soundtrack of destruction, testifying to its size and agitation. Communication with outside authorities proved impossible due to the storm's interference with cellular signals and the lodge's isolated location. Elena discovered an emergency radio system in the storage area and managed to establish contact with rescue services in Sinaia. Though the weather conditions made immediate assistance impossible, the rescue coordinator advised the group to remain hidden and avoid any actions that might provoke the animal further. The brown bear spent several hours exploring every accessible area of the lodge, apparently frustrated by its inability to locate significant food sources. The guests could hear the animal testing various barriers and investigating different rooms, suggesting a methodical search pattern rather than random destruction. Occasionally, the bear would approach their hiding place and pause, possibly detecting human scents or sounds, despite their efforts at concealment. As dawn approached, the storm began to subside, and the bear's activity level decreased noticeably. The animal eventually departed through the same entrance it had used hours earlier, leaving behind extensive damage throughout the lodge's common areas. The guests waited an additional hour before cautiously emerging from their hiding place to assess the situation and confirm the predator's departure. Rescue teams arrived approximately 4 hours after the storm cleared, using tracked vehicles to navigate the snow-blocked access road. They found the 6 guests physically unharmed, but deeply shaken by their prolonged confinement and the constant threat of discovery. The lodge's interior bore witness to the bear's presence through destroyed furniture, scattered belongings, and distinctive claw marks on wooden surfaces. The investigation revealed that lodge management had failed to follow proper security protocols during the emergency closure, particularly in securing all entrances. The incident prompted immediate changes to safety procedures at mountain lodges throughout the Carpathian region, including the implementation of mandatory security checklists and enhancements to emergency communication systems. Elena eventually completed her travel article about the lodge, though the final piece focused more on wildlife safety considerations than the facility's rustic charm. The bear was never located by wildlife authorities, though increased monitoring in the area suggested it had returned to more remote forest regions where human encounters would be less likely. The mountain town of Cedar Ridge, Montana, had experienced its share of wildfire threats since its establishment in 1952 as a logging community. However, the blaze that approached on August 15, 2021, represented the most serious evacuation scenario in the town's history. Located in a narrow valley surrounded by dense coniferous forests, the community of 800 residents had always understood their vulnerability to fast-moving fires during the region's increasingly dry summer seasons. The particular fire-threatening Cedar Ridge had originated from a lightning strike 3 days earlier and consumed over 12,000 acres despite aggressive suppression efforts. Cole Madsen, a veteran firefighter with 15 years of experience in wildland fire suppression, had volunteered to assist with the evacuation process despite being off-duty when the emergency order was issued. The 34-year-old Montana native possessed extensive knowledge of the region's backcountry roads and trail systems, making him valuable for reaching isolated properties where residents might require assistance evacuating livestock or securing valuable equipment before fleeing the advancing flames. The evacuation operation involved multiple agencies coordinating the systematic removal of residents from increasingly dangerous zones as the fire jumped containment lines and accelerated toward populated areas. Cole had been assigned to patrol several remote properties on the town's eastern perimeter, using his personal ATV to navigate narrow logging roads that larger emergency vehicles could not access. His radio maintained contact with the incident command post, though communication became sporadic in areas where the mountainous terrain interfered with signal transmission. The morning's evacuation efforts proceeded smoothly until Cole encountered an elderly rancher who had refused earlier evacuation orders and remained determined to defend his property independently. After spending considerable time convincing the man to abandon his homestead, Cole found himself behind schedule and facing deteriorating conditions as smoke density increased and visibility dropped to dangerous levels throughout the forest. While attempting to return to the main evacuation route, Cole took what he believed was a familiar shortcut through an overgrown ATV trail that would save approximately 20 minutes. The path, rarely used except by hunters during autumn months, featured numerous obstacles, including fallen trees and erosion damage that required careful navigation. Dense smoke from the approaching fire severely limited visibility, forcing Cole to rely on his GPS unit and his general knowledge of the area's topography. He stopped approximately 2 miles down the trail to check his position and radio his status to the command post when the grizzly bear emerged from the smoke-filled underbrush. The animal, a mature male weighing an estimated 600 pounds, appeared disoriented and agitated by the approaching fire and the unusual conditions surrounding its normal habitat. Wildlife experts later theorized that the bear had been fleeing the fire's advance and became confused by the smoke, noise, and unfamiliar human activity in its territory. The encounter happened with shocking suddenness as the bear charged from a distance of less than 30 feet, giving Cole no opportunity to retreat or deploy defensive measures. The animal struck him with tremendous force, knocking him completely off his ATV and onto the rocky trail surface. The impact separated Cole from his radio equipment and emergency supplies, leaving him defensively helpless against an apex predator acting on pure instinct. The bear's attack focused primarily on Cole's shoulder and thigh areas, inflicting deep puncture wounds and severe lacerations that would require extensive medical treatment. The animal's behavior suggested defensive, rather than predatory motivations, as it delivered several powerful swipes before pausing to assess the perceived threat. Cole later reported that the bear seemed as startled by the encounter as he was, suggesting that neither party had anticipated the confrontation. During a brief lull in the attack, Cole managed to crawl underneath his overturned ATV, using the vehicle's frame as protection from further assault. The bear circled the machine several times, occasionally testing the barrier with its claws, but appeared increasingly agitated by the approaching fire sounds and dense smoke. After several tense minutes, the animal abandoned its investigation and disappeared back into the forest, presumably continuing its escape from the advancing flames. Cole remained hidden beneath the ATV for nearly 30 minutes before attempting to signal for help, uncertain whether the bear might return and concerned about his ability to defend himself given his injuries. His radio had been damaged in the initial attack, but he managed to activate an emergency beacon that would alert search teams to his approximate location. The device's GPS coordinates proved crucial for rescue efforts in the smoke-obscured terrain. A helicopter crew located Cole approximately 2 hours after losing radio contact, following the emergency beacon signal through increasingly hazardous flying conditions. The rescue required considerable skill, given the limited visibility and the need to evacuate an injured person from difficult terrain while maintaining a safe distance from the advancing fire. Paramedics stabilized Cole's condition before transport to a regional trauma center. Cole's medical treatment involved multiple surgeries to repair damage to his shoulder joint and reconstruct torn muscle tissue in his thigh. The recovery process required 8 weeks of intensive physical therapy, followed by additional months of rehabilitation, before he could return to active firefighting duties. His injuries served as a stark reminder of the unexpected dangers that wildfire personnel face beyond the obvious threats of flames and smoke inhalation. Wildlife officials confirmed that several bears had been displaced by the fire and relocated to unfamiliar territories where encounters with humans became more likely. The particular bear that attacked Cole was never identified, though tracking efforts suggested that most displaced animals had successfully escaped the fire zone and returned to suitable habitat areas. The incident prompted revisions to evacuation protocols, particularly regarding solo operations in remote areas during emergencies. Cole eventually returned to firefighting, but adopted more cautious approaches when working alone in backcountry locations. He frequently shared his experience with other wildland firefighters, emphasizing the importance of maintaining awareness of wildlife displacement during large-scale fire events. The Cedar Ridge fire ultimately consumed 47,000 acres before being contained, although a successful evacuation operation prevented any civilian casualties. Cole's encounter remained one of the most unusual incidents documented during the firefighting effort, highlighting the complex challenges that emergency responders face when natural disasters disrupt normal wildlife behavior patterns. The wilderness of southern Alaska's Kodiak Island had provided hunting opportunities for experienced outdoorspeople since the region's earliest settlements. However, the massive brown bears that gave the island its reputation remained among North America's most formidable predators. On September 22, 2018, 2 veteran hunters from Minnesota embarked on what they expected would be a routine elk hunting expedition in the island's dense spruce forests, unaware that their trip would result in one of the most harrowing bear encounters documented in recent decades. Lars Nystrom, a 42-year-old construction contractor, and Devin Pike, a 38-year-old outdoor guide, had planned their Alaska hunting trip for over 2 years, saving money and coordinating schedules to pursue elk in some of the continent's most pristine wilderness areas. Both men possessed extensive hunting experience throughout the American Midwest. They had completed multiple expeditions in challenging terrain, though neither had previously encountered the unique conditions present in Alaska's coastal forests. The morning hunt began successfully when the pair located fresh elk sign approximately 4 miles from their base camp, following a well-used game trail through thick stands of Sitka spruce and Devil's Club undergrowth. The tracking conditions appeared ideal, with recent rainfall providing clear prints on the soft forest floor, and both hunters felt confident about their prospects for success, given the abundant wildlife activity in the area. Their pursuit of a wounded bull elk led them deeper into increasingly dense forest, where visibility remained limited to just a few dozen yards in any direction. The elk, struck by Lars's initial shot, but not fatally wounded, had traveled nearly a mile before the hunters managed to close the distance for a follow-up attempt. Both men understood the ethical importance of tracking wounded game to prevent unnecessary suffering, despite the challenges posed by the difficult terrain. The massive Kodiak bear that confronted them emerged from the forest with shocking suddenness, rising to its full height of over 9 feet and displaying the intimidating presence that made these animals legendary among hunters and wildlife enthusiasts. The bear, an adult male weighing an estimated 1,200 pounds, had likely been following the same wounded elk that the hunters were tracking, creating a dangerous convergence of predator and human interests in the confined forest environment. Wildlife experts later speculated that the bear's aggressive behavior stemmed from food stress related to an unusually poor salmon run that year, which had forced many Kodiak bears to seek alternative protein sources, including terrestrial game animals. The combination of hunger, territorial instincts, and the scent of wounded prey created ideal conditions for a dangerous encounter between the apex predator and human hunters. The bear's charge happened with terrifying speed despite its massive size, covering the 30-yard distance between the parties in just seconds. Lars managed to fire first, striking the animal in the shoulder area, but the heavy bullet appeared to have minimal immediate effect on the bear's momentum or aggressive behavior. The animal's thick hide, layers of fat, and massive bone structure provided natural armor that absorbed significant impact without stopping its advance. Devon attempted to provide supporting fire as the bear closed the distance, managing 2 additional shots before the animal crashed into both hunters with devastating force. The impact knocked both men to the ground and scattered their equipment across the forest floor, though they managed to maintain control of their rifles despite the chaos of the encounter. The bear's attack focused initially on Lars, who had delivered the first shot and represented the most immediate threat in the animal's perception. The massive predator inflicted severe lacerations to Lars's leg using its powerful claws, opening wounds that would require immediate medical attention to prevent life-threatening blood loss. The bear's behavior suggested both defensive and predatory motivations as it attempted to neutralize perceived threats while also investigating potential food sources. During the next 30 seconds, both hunters emptied their high-powered rifles into the attacking bear, delivering a total of 10 rounds before the animal finally collapsed. The sustained gunfire proved necessary due to the bear's incredible resilience and the life-threatening nature of the encounter. However, both men later expressed regret about the necessity of killing such a magnificent animal in what was essentially a territorial dispute. The bear remained alive, but incapacitated for several minutes after the shooting stopped, producing low growls and occasional movements that kept both hunters alert for signs of renewed aggression. Alaska wildlife regulations required hunters to report such defensive killings, and both men understood the importance of documenting the encounter thoroughly for subsequent investigation by state authorities. Lars's injuries required immediate field treatment to control bleeding and prevent shock, while Devon prepared an emergency evacuation plan using their satellite communication device. The remote location meant that a helicopter rescue would require several hours to coordinate and execute, making basic first aid critical for Lars's survival chances. The rescue helicopter arrived approximately 4 hours after receiving the emergency signal, navigating difficult weather conditions and challenging terrain to reach the hunter's location. Paramedics stabilized Lars's condition before transport to Anchorage for specialized trauma treatment, while Devon accompanied the evacuation crew to provide detailed information about the encounter. Lars's recovery involved multiple surgical procedures to repair damaged muscle tissue and address potential infection from the bear's claws, which typically carry significant bacterial loads. The healing process required months of physical therapy and ongoing medical monitoring, though he eventually regained full use of the injured leg. The Fish and Game officials conducted a thorough investigation of the incident, ultimately ruling it a justified defensive shooting given the circumstances and the immediate threat to human life. The bear's remains were examined to determine its health status and possible reasons for the aggressive behavior, revealing the food stress condition that likely contributed to the encounter. Both hunters eventually returned to their hunting pursuits, though they adopted more cautious approaches when pursuing wounded game in areas known for large predator populations. Their experience became a frequently cited example of the importance of proper equipment, training, and preparation when hunting in Alaska's wilderness areas. The incident reinforced existing recommendations for hunters regarding bear safety protocols, including the importance of traveling in groups, carrying appropriate firearms, and maintaining constant awareness of potential wildlife encounters. Lars and Devin both became advocates for comprehensive hunter education programs that address the unique challenges of pursuing game in habitats shared with apex predators. The remote Arctic waters near Svalbard, Norway, had served as a critical research location for climate scientists since the 1960s, when international cooperation agreements established the archipelago as a hub for polar studies. The region's unique position at 78 degrees north latitude provided researchers with access to some of the Arctic's most dynamic ice formations. However, the increasingly unstable conditions caused by warming temperatures made fieldwork progressively more hazardous with each passing year. On March 14, 2020, Dr. Sina Falkenberg led a small research team onto the shifting ice floes to collect crucial ice core samples as part of a multinational climate monitoring project. The Norwegian glaciologist, with 12 years of experience in Arctic research, had assembled a team of 4 specialists, including 2 graduate students and a seasoned ice safety coordinator. Their mission involved extracting cores from specific locations where historical data suggested significant environmental changes over recent decades. The research site, situated approximately 15 kilometers from the main Svalbard research station, necessitated careful navigation across unstable sea ice that shifted constantly due to wind and current patterns. Dr. Falkenberg's team had planned their expedition during a brief weather window that promised relatively stable conditions, though Arctic weather remained notoriously unpredictable even during supposedly favorable periods. The team established their work site on what appeared to be a stable ice floe measuring roughly 200 meters in diameter, large enough to accommodate their drilling equipment and temporary shelter, while providing reasonable safety margins from the open water surrounding their position. Initial ice thickness measurements confirmed adequate support for their activities, though the constant creaking and groaning sounds indicated ongoing movement within the larger ice pack. Their drilling operations proceeded normally through the morning hours, with team members collecting valuable core samples that would later provide insights into historical climate patterns. The work required considerable time and patience, as proper ice core extraction demanded careful attention to prevent contamination or damage to the samples that represented years of accumulated environmental data. The polar bear's appearance around midday caught the research team completely off guard, despite their awareness of the species' presence throughout the Svalbard region. The animal, an adult female weighing approximately 400 pounds, approached their worksite silently across the ice, demonstrating the stealth capabilities that made polar bears such effective hunters in their natural environment. Dr. Falkenberg first noticed the bear when it was already within 50 meters of their position, far too close for the team to implement standard safety protocols or retreat to secure locations. The animal showed clear signs of curiosity rather than immediate aggression, though polar bears remained unpredictable and potentially dangerous regardless of their apparent behavioral state. The team's situation became critical when they realized that ice movement during the previous hours had separated their workflow from the main ice pack, leaving them stranded on an isolated platform with no escape route back to solid ground. The bear's presence on their floe meant that any attempt to cross to adjacent ice formations would require passing within striking distance of the predator. As the hours passed, the polar bear demonstrated typical investigative behavior, approaching their equipment and supplies while maintaining a watchful distance from the human occupants. The animal showed particular interest in their food supplies and showed no signs of departing, despite the team's attempts to discourage its presence through noise and movement. The research team's emergency protocols included flare guns for wildlife deterrent purposes, and they deployed several flares throughout the afternoon in attempts to frighten the bear away from their position. The bright pyrotechnic displays created a temporary distraction, but failed to convince the animal to abandon its investigation of their camp and equipment. Communication with the Svalbard research station remained possible through satellite radio, though rescue operations faced significant challenges due to weather conditions and the shifting nature of the ice pack. Helicopter rescue required precise positioning and timing, as landing on unstable ice presented serious risks to both aircraft and personnel. The bear's behavior became increasingly bold as darkness approached, with the animal testing the team's makeshift barriers and investigating their shelter more aggressively. The predator's natural curiosity and opportunistic feeding habits made it unlikely to abandon such an unusual and potentially rewarding situation without external intervention. Temperature conditions during the night dropped to dangerously low levels, forcing the research team to balance their need for warmth against the risk of attracting additional attention from polar bears through heat signatures or scent trails. Their survival equipment included Arctic-rated sleeping systems, though maintaining body heat required careful energy management. The ice flow's continued movement throughout the night created additional stress fractures that threatened to divide their already precarious platform further. The team monitored these developments carefully, knowing that a breakup of their ice shelter would force them into direct contact with the frigid Arctic waters, where survival times are measured in minutes rather than hours. Dawn brought improved visibility and weather conditions that finally enabled helicopter rescue operations. The pilot required exceptional skill to hover over the unstable ice, while rescue personnel secured the research team and their essential equipment. The polar bear maintained its position throughout the evacuation, apparently unbothered by the aircraft noise and activity. The successful rescue concluded a 12-hour ordeal that highlighted both the increasing dangers of Arctic research and the unpredictable behavior of wildlife in rapidly changing polar environments. Dr. Falkenberg's team lost most of their research equipment and collected samples, though they gained valuable experience regarding safety protocols in extreme conditions. The incident prompted revisions to Arctic research safety standards, particularly regarding procedures for wildlife encounters and emergency communication systems. The polar bear involved in the encounter was never seen again by research station personnel. However, tracking data suggested it had returned to more traditional hunting areas away from human activity. Dr. Falkenberg continued her climate research work, implementing more conservative safety margins and enhancing wildlife monitoring protocols for subsequent expeditions. The experience reinforced her understanding of the Arctic's harsh realities and the respect required when working in one of Earth's most unforgiving environments.